Oh, hi, Mark. Okay. Getting it going today, everybody. Hope you're having a most righteous Saturday so far. I don't know if I want that. Yeah, I'll show the Sabbath logo. Why not? Just pull the hair back a little bit. Obviously, we'll give everybody a few minutes to kind of trickle in here. Austin, long days and pleasant nights to you as well, good sir. My dude, Jacob. Hope you were having the most rad status Saturday, man. Very excited to discuss this one. Just popping in to say hi. Hey, man, I totally appreciate it. I know in the midst of Saturdays, especially since it's so much later, it's I think 9 hours from where I'm at right now for you, man. But yes, thanks for popping in. Mark, another one of my homies from across the pond. Hope things are well. Yeah, they're decent enough. I mean, chug-a-lugging. It's September is such a crazy month for myself and Cecil. It's both of our birthday months. It's my guitar player's birthday this month. We're trying to plan a little out-of-town excursion. We're finishing editing a music video for my band Chiron for a cover of Civil War, the Guns N' Roses song. So yeah, I directed it and am in the final stages of the editing process, which is pretty dope. So yeah, it's been a busy month, man, and still all the regular horror show stuff and yeah, you name it. So who else is jumping through? Matty Jorison, Trickle. What's up, buddy? My dude Malito was good, Fuego. You know, there's a lot of good. Obviously, there's a lot of negativity in the world and has been for a lot of 2020. But this palaver with all of you always brings that positivity, which I appreciate the hell out of. Zach King is jumping in. There's the man. Ah, shucks. I'm just a man. I have my moments. So thanks, dude. It's going pretty damn good. So especially since I had such a blast rereading this one. I think I've read like specific stories since. Like I totally checked back out Secret Window, Secret Garden. I believe it was last year that I was doing the anniversary review of the David Koepp film. So I totally reread that. I think I even reread Langoliers when I was reviewing the miniseries a little while back as well. But it had been a hot minute since I checked out The Library Policeman and The Sundog. And boy, it's an awesome reminder just to recall how badass and pretty scary both of those stories are. Okay, Joshua Gordon's jumping on. When you did 1408 for your ranking, was that the theater ending or DVD? Oh, you know, I did the theatrical ending, and I think there's like 2 different endings besides the original theatrical. I know it's arguable. I didn't really try to include extended cuts or anything like that. That's why I did a theatrical countdown, and yeah, but we still have to do the TV miniseries, the direct-to-video, which is going to be significantly rougher. And yeah, so that'll be coming soon, along with Cecil and I are still planning that live version of adding the novella collections and the short story collections. We're still going to finish out the book tier ranking at some particular point here before the end of the year, and we're going to do that one live. So keep in mind, looks like we've already got over a dozen people in here, and this one goes to 11. Got 11 people in there. Who else is cruising through? Mark Pearson says, well timed. Just got to, oh, awesome, man. I hope that the child rearing and the parenthood is going well. Hey, I know it's a very demanding process, not personally, but from all of my friends and both of my little brothers who have little ones. It's rewarding, but obviously challenging at times too. So more power to you, sir. Thanks for cruising through. Okay, Brady Jorgensen says, hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. What's going on, man? Juan Martinez, pass away. What's going on, dude? Good to see you in here as well. Yes, theater ending was so much better. Right on. Okay, how low will The Shining be on the miniseries list? Hey, I actually really dig the Shining miniseries. Despite its budgetary limitations, there's something to the performance of the actress who plays Wendy specifically. I don't think Dude from Wings is too terrible. I mean, it's a little bit different of a take than Jax. And just for the sheer fact that the miniseries has more of the heart and the arc of Jack's character in comparison with I'm just bonkers the whole goddamn time. And I know a lot of novel purists feel that way. The CG with those with the hedge maze and the hedge animals and stuff looks really shitty, unfortunately. But there's aspects of that, kiss and kiss, and that's what I've been missing. I actually like the Mick Garris miniseries. Now, from a visual standpoint, 100% abso-friggin-lutely, Kubrick's film is leaps and bounds above as far as just artistic style and whatnot. As far as storytelling goes, that's debatable. But hey, art is subjective, as I always say on here. Okay, what else we got? Did you say they are remaking The Langoliers? That is one that I would love to see remade, but it is still not in the pipeline. I feel like it is ripe for a remake, because when we get into the discussion proper, I really like The Langoliers, man. It's a fascinating story. And even though it's very dated, I still find some aspects of enjoyment in that ABC miniseries. So we are just about to start things up proper, but I just want to say, Zach King says, I love Steve Weber, so the miniseries always gets a pass for me. Agreed, man. And Steven Weber's actually been a great narrator for a lot of the audiobook work that he's done for Steve. So very cool in that regard. Any news on that? I think I addressed that. I believe, Langoliers is not one of the ones that is officially in the pipeline. I've been trying to put together, and it's all put together, just hasn't been filmed yet, of every upcoming Stephen King project that is currently in development in some stage, whether it's still in the writing/announcement stage, the pre-production stage, whether they have filmed some of it and it's in post, like with The Stand. So it's going to be interesting. And also, how about The Stand? December 17th, we get the first episode. It's entitled The End. It's directed by Josh Boone. And I'm pretty pumped for it, honestly. But approaching with cautious optimism, because I still really love that 94 Mick Garris version. And the comic adaptation Marvel did is terrific. Nothing beats the source material, as everybody knows. But we didn't do a reaction to that little 30-second teaser, because that was like a teaser for the teaser, basically, when it's just such a small amount of time. You know, they're putting together an official teaser/main trailer right now. So that's what you're going to see a big breakdown on once that finally drops, which is supposedly going to be very soon. So, okay, so since we got 20 people in here, I'm going to try to cruise through those last little bits. The maze was so much better than the CGI in the miniseries. Agreed. Did you enjoy Dr. Sleep? The film Dr. Sleep, I enjoyed more than even the actual source material. As much as I adore the source material, Mike Flanagan at this particular point can do no wrong. And the fact that he said in a discussion with Mick Garris at Fantasia Fest, I believe it is, up in Canada, the Great White North. He said that his ultimate dream project would be to adapt The Dark Tower. And to quote Jay from Jane Silent Bob Strike Back, I think I just filled the cup, not to be gross or anything. But I was surprised by how far up the Kubrick film was in the ranking. I think it was a great movie. Bad adaptation, yes, definitely agreed. The new people. I love it. Bring on as many new peeps to the Ka-Tet here as possible. Thanks for letting me know that the Sleep Director's Cut was on HBO. It's a lot better than the theatrical. Yeah, I mean, that's a film that some people felt was a little long in the tooth already. I think with the home streaming format, it does just aid to longer viewing in that regard. Like I just reviewed on my personal channel, in Fuego-tainment, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and that was like 2:15, something like that. It didn't feel as long in that regard. But yes, I guess now since we have 20 plus people in here, we're going to get things started, because I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time today, but I'm supremely appreciative that you're here. So yes, brace your ears, everybody. Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hey-O to Stephen King. That's a Rizzle, y'all. So very stoked to have you here. And obviously, as always, welcome cordially to The Horror Show. This is a program that I do every Saturday. But if you are just stumbling upon this live installment of it, the first Saturday of every month, we catch up on the book of the month from the previous month. So August book of the month was none other than 1990's Four Past Midnight, which was the second four novella, I should say, collection that King did following different seasons that I believe he put out 8 years prior. And one thing that I was curious about for anybody who actually has the paperback edition of this, because I personally do not, I was curious if it retains these awesome introductions that King has. So he has like a pretty lengthy bit in here called Straight Up Midnight, where he just talks about his career up to that point, being 16 years into it in 1990, because Carrie was 74. And he just gives interesting insight about the process of writing a novella versus a short versus, a full-fledged novel. He also talks about how this collection is significantly more horror-centric compared to different seasons, which only had one horror story in it, and the other three. Although he says it only had one horror story in it, being The Breathing Method, but I contend very just, adamantly that Apt Pupil is most def a horror story through and through, even if it doesn't deal with the supernatural, so to speak. But I love when King talks just very personally to us as constant readers, and it's just there's a very interesting intimacy to it. It feels like a friendship, which he had really cultivated significantly at this particular point. It also amuses me that he makes no qualms about the fact that he's like, I'm in it for the money, I'm in it for the obsession, I'm in it for, I mean, this is when he was in the process of getting sober. So, I mean, maybe he was just a little more amusingly candid, and maybe the humility that I think has set in a lot more with his age. I mean, there's that fine line between confidence and arrogance, as I always say. But yeah, so besides straight up midnight, there's also these brief little intros before each story. So like Langoliers was, he dedicated this one to Joe, which is cool. And this is called One Past Midnight, a note on the Langoliers. And so that's one interesting thing to keep in mind, is that 4 past midnight it's 4 different stories to be told past midnight, after midnight. So that's something that I, to be quite fair, had forgotten that was the significance of the title, that it's 4 tales to be told past midnight, which is cool. But yeah, if anybody can chime in, are these retained in the paperbacks? I'm really curious, because it is a damn shame if they're not, because it's just really interesting insight about the king and just how things go with him. Let's see if anybody is actually chiming in about that. I'm not sure. One of my favorite covers. Yeah, this cover is really dope, man. Dale Strunk is here. What is up, good sir? Glad that you have made it. The paperback has the introductions. That is badass, because I would be really disappointed if those weren't retained. So, but yeah, so this was put out. It's funny because the Wikipedia had conflicting information. The Wikipedia said that it was August of 1990, but then it later on gives, September 24th, 1990 as the official release date. But these are basically 4 stories that King wrote from 1988 to 1989. And he decided, hey, I'm going to double down. I'm going to follow that same approach that I did with different seasons. And yeah, man, it's tough in some ways. And I know this will be blasphemous for a lot of people, especially those who just adore Shawshank and The Body, stuff like that. But there's, as the pure horror fan, and as the fact that at least with 3 of these 4 stories, they have that classic EC Comics, Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt sort of ending, where you've got like the crazy twist and the chilling sort of finale that leaves you just like, I don't know, you're like kind of freaked out a little bit. You're like, damn, all right then, all right. Obviously, the first one, and this is, just to forewarn everybody, this is going to be like a pretty in-depth, spoilery sort of discussion. Langoliers definitely has the brightest ending in all ways in comparison with the other 3 stories. But yeah, man, I mean, this won the Bram Stoker Award in 1990 for Best Collection. It was also nominated the following year in 1991 for the Locus Award. And another interesting thing is this was also the same year that Stephen King unleashed that uncut version of The Stand with all that awesome Bernie Wrightson artwork in it. So 90 was a pretty solid year for the man. And also later on in the fall, in November, I think, was when the miniseries came out. So still, despite the sobriety and everything, and trying to figure out some aspects of his life, firing on all cylinders creatively. And yeah, Langoliers also has an interesting format that I wanted to at least call out, where each chapter has a specific heading. So chapter 1 starts out with Bad News for Captain Angle, The Little Blind Girl, The Lady's Scent, The Dalton Gang Arrives in Tombstone, The Strange Plight of Flight 29. And so anytime you give that little precursor, it's almost like a little taste of what's to come in each chapter. And in some ways, I feel like it spurs the reader along. And yeah, it's definitely helpful in that process. I listened to, I'm trying to remember who, I believe it was Willem Dafoe, because I always like to both read the book in our book of the month and then also later on listen to it as well. So early in the month, I'll read it. And then later in the month, I'll listen to it as well, just to get those dueling perspectives and stuff, because King is a big proponent of audiobooks, as we all know. And Willem Dafoe reads this one. And sadly, you don't get those headings, which is a little bit of a bummer. But hey, what are you going to do? He does read it very well. It's amusing to hear him do some of the voices like Dinah's and, just some of the women's and whatnot, Bethany. And I'm trying to remember the other girl's name, Laurel. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, man, so this is a story that I'm not going to really focus upon as much. I want you guys to chime in with your thoughts about 4 past midnight because of the Langoliers, which is technically 1 past midnight. And that's because of the fact that I did touch upon this story a lot when I did that review of the miniseries. And for the most part, it's actually a pretty faithful adaptation, despite the dated aspect of those and the effects of those Langoliers, man. Damn, is it rough. It's pretty rough in that regard. But really, with the exception of Brian's little nightmare, where his wife's hand is like being sucked out of the hole in the cabin and stuff with all the pressure being messed up. That's a creepy bit. And then also Albert and him just thinking about being this like Jewish gunslinger and stuff, and he's like moseying around through Tombstone and all this. Like Albert is definitely a character that is developed significantly better, I would say, in this compared to the miniseries. I mean, our mystery writer, what's his name, Bob, I want to say, Bob Jenkins. So he was adapted and just kind of acted pretty good. And as was Craig. I thought Craig, Perfect Strangers dude as a villain, not too bad in that. But we're not here to make comparisons. We are here just to talk about the particular source material. But yeah, cast of characters. You've got Brian, who is the pilot, who it's very much Ka and destiny for him to be on this plane that goes through this Aurora Borealis over the Mojave Desert, ends them in this world that has moved on essentially and has like the basic fibers of that reality being eaten away and just slowly dying. Just fascinating. And you've got Dinah, who's the blind girl who she's got the touch, the power, the shine, whatever the hell you want to call it. Once again, another story with a gifted kid. And I know that in March on the 2nd, 2021, when Later comes out, it's apparently another gifted kid. So, hey, Steve, I love you, man. But he definitely has his go-tos, so to speak, for better or for worse. But yeah, Dinah she's a tragic character, and it's really sad. And it's interesting, her connection with Tommy, though, in the fact that she basically kind of strings him along to almost, at least in my estimation, slow down the process of those Langoliers, as they are dubbed at one particular point, which is really just a figment of Craig's imagination after how abusive his father was, and and then the alcoholism of his mother and all this different stuff. I mean, he really is, as far as villains go, despite being a real asshole, he's one that you kind of sympathize with because he is a byproduct of his upbringing, unfortunately, and that's why he's turned out as terribly as he has. So just having that gravitas and that different perspective about him a little more so. I mean, they do it decently in the miniseries, and King has that really funny cameo at the imaginary boardroom meeting at the very end. But yeah, as far as just a few other characters go, I mean, we mentioned, man, I said Albert. Damn it, I believe it's Austin. Now I'm trying to remember. Damn it, Fuego, you're an asshole. Ace Costner, basically Costner, the violinist kid who's heading over. But I do enjoy the additional development of his character and just his imaginary gunslinging through Tombstone. Let my frequent flyers go. That was one particular line that was going on through his head, where he was just reverting back to some of his biblical upbringing. And since I experienced that myself, I mean, hey man, it's all part of the process. Nick Hopewell is another interesting character in the fact that he is this like British embassy, like kind of secret agent dude. He was gone rogue and he's become a hitman and stuff. Also decent portrayal in the miniseries, in my estimation. And we mentioned our mystery writer. King always likes to have his writers in his books if he can at least inject them in there. It is funny, though, because Bob Jenkins, at one point, when they're trying to go through all the different conspiracy theories about who could be responsible for them, as opposed to making it supernatural phenomenon or some sort of otherworldly thing going down, he's envisioning that the shop, and he mentions them specifically, which is cool. He mentions that they could, potentially just be responsible for this or whatever, which I thought was kind of dope. And then really, I mean, you've got Laurel, who's the school teacher who's going to hook up. You've got Bethany, who's going presumably to drug rehab. She has the just romance thing with her, and that was actually one voice that Willem Dafoe really, it was like nails on a chalkboard for me with her and just her panickiness and stuff. It's a little bit tough to deal with in all honesty, but and then we've got just some of the other smaller characters. Oh boy, we've got dude who loves to eat, and oh boy, I'm trying to remember his damn name. Not of the utmost like Don Gaffner or Warwick. That's right, Warwick was our kind of schlumpy guy, and then you also had Don Gaffey, who unfortunately he's another one of the victims besides Dinah of Mr. Tommy and stuff like that. There's a very interesting analogy about Tommy though that I'd forgotten about, and it's this deep sea fish analogy that King goes through, and it's all about these fish that live in just insane pressure at the bottom of the ocean, and yet if you were to take them out of those pressure situations, they combust. And so he makes a very fascinating analogy about how that is basically how it relates to Tomi's character. And so I thought that was kind of dope. Oh boy, what else? And there's also this analogy to Charlton Heston's, I believe it's called The Naked Jungle, about this ant attack, and that's kind of what they're kind of make this comparison about the Langoliers to be, which is fascinating. And yet, really, after they kind of leave Tomi to the pits and everything, and after they kind of figure out the mystery of everything and how to refuel and how there's almost like this little mini pocket universe inside their plane compared to the world that has moved on that they're surrounded by. That's good stuff. I mean, this is very much like a Twilight Zone sort of story, and that's why I dig it. Albeit this one without like the crazy, ending that's gonna like, oh my god, head spinning, whatever. It's a pretty happy ending aside from what happens with Nick. I mean, and obviously the loss of Dinah, and to a lesser degree Dawn and whatnot. But really, I mean, it's kind of a rosy ending, kind of one of those silver linings sort of situations. But yeah, God had not taken it back when Dinah is about to die, and Laurel is just screaming out to God, why, and all of this other stuff. It's a very, very emotional moment, and one that resonated significantly with me. And yeah, Shooting Stars Only. That was another one. And another thing that I forgot about is the fact that there is some drunk dude who literally through the entire story, I think they just call him Blackbeard throughout. He's just sleeping on the plane as all of this stuff goes down, with them landing in Bangor and them going into the airport itself and then going back out and refueling and all of the drama that takes place in between. I mean, yeah, it's pretty amusing how the 11th passenger was just chilling the whole damn time, sleeping off a hangover. So I thought that was funny. But yeah, I mean, once again, as I said, this is a story that I tackled extensively and even did some comparative work when I was reviewing the miniseries. So since the comments have just breezed on by, I am going to bring them up really quick. So please, all of you guys, chime in now. We've got 3 other stories to cover, but I want to hear what you have to say about the Langoliers specifically, and then we will segue through the rest of the chat. Okay, I'm just going to jump on up, see where we were at. Okay, all right. I think we're almost there. Okay, one of my favorite covers. Okay, yeah, that's right about where we were when Dale was jumping on. Okay, yep, the paperback has it. Straight up midnight segment. That's dope, Zach. Thanks for the info. How's it going, Fuego? Love the Sabbath shirt. Damn Rizzle, man. I've been trying to break out some of the older shirts and stuff because I'm one of those people who, much like I collect books, I just collect stupid shirts, whether it's band shirts or nerd shirts, horror shirts, whatever. That's what the conventions are so much fun for, which we had all but canceled this year, which is depressing. It's better to read after midnight. Okay, hey Troy, it's better to read the introductions after reading the stories, though. Interesting, because they do in fact get. I mean, it's interesting to see the creative process behind specifically. I don't know how super spoilery they are, but obviously that's up for debate. Joshua Gordon says I can't read any of these stories during daylight. That's very, very dedicated of you, sir. Okay, the Odyssey of Flight 33 says, okay. Me, when someone wants me to try, oh, that's hilarious. Okay, Willem Dafoe as a teenage girl. Oof, yeah, Maddie, that's what I was referring to. Him as Bethany. It's pretty rough, man. Okay, it's my favorite story. I love the symbolism of each one of them being stuck in a place in their life and making life changes. That is a very astute observation there, Josh. And I mean, yeah, damn good, man. One thing that King mentions in that introduction, the Straight Up Midnight, that I found fascinating and that I had kind of forgotten about the symbolism with each story is that it does deal with perception of time per se. And it's whether it's dealing with repressed memories like a couple of the stories do, or just, time passing from one year to another, like in our final story, or just how time even transpires in this alternate world that they find in the Langoliers once they land in Bangor. Time is basically transpiring differently, and then when they go back through, they're ahead of time, and time is going to catch up and sync up. I mean, that's some fascinating stuff in my estimation. Willem Dafoe should have read Library Policeman. Yeah, I still thought the narrator who was not it wasn't Tim Sale who did that one. I think Tim did the final one, the Sundog. I can't remember offhand, but okay. I think the concept of the Langoliers is great, but maybe the execution not so much. I don't really like the characters in the dialogue, but maybe that's due to Defoe's strange reading. Yeah, I mean, he was better with some characters than with others. That is most definitely true. All right, my dude Malito says, love 4 Past Midnight, super solid collection. The Langoliers is probably my fave out of the 4. Second fave novella collection after Full Dark, No Stars. And that's a hot take with as much as people love different seasons. So, okay, I think we're almost caught up. King definitely has a talent for creating a vast group of characters who would normally never be in the same room together and putting them in terrifying situations. Dale, hey, thanks so much for cruising through very quickly, man. Just coming and making a brief appearance, man. Always love your insights, whether here or in the Facebook group. Okay, so let's jump to story number 2. And I am actually going to note number 2. Always have to have a South Park reference in here somewhere. Just going to get a little bit in the water. All righty, y'all. So, story number 2. Secret Window, Secret Garden. Another one that has been adapted. It's made into a film by David Coop, starred Johnny Depp. And I actually quite like the film adaptation of that one. Now, I know Johnny Depp he's gone through the ringer with his divorce proceedings and all that other stuff, but that is beside the point. I actually think that's a very strong adaptation and relatively faithful to the source material. But this was 2 Past Midnight in the collection, read by James Woods, actually, and I thought he was great. I thought he did a tremendous job. Obviously, everybody knows that this story draws inspiration from The Dark Half, which he wrote like right around the same time, which is interesting to me. And also Misery, which he wrote just like a year or so before. So he was very hung up on this aspect of just not only having a pseudonym and an alter ego and things of that nature, but also with the obsessiveness of fandom. And I know in real life, King has had people accuse him of plagiarism before, and those cases were inevitably thrown out and stuff like that. But yeah, he had started to encounter some of the crazies, the Mad Hatters, I guess, as Pop would call them. But yeah, man. So obviously, with Mort Rainey, who is our lead, who is out in the middle of nowhere in Maine at this cabin, he's trying to write. He's got writer's block. He's recently divorced, and he's definitely not taking it very well, regrettably. So that's definitely a thing that's a little bit of a bummer. But yeah, I mean, lots of King similarities in this guy who has somebody show up at his doorstep and say, "You stole my story, right is right," and all that different stuff. John Turturro did a great job in that role in the film, in my estimation. But yeah, so Mort's got lots of similarities to King himself, not only being from Maine, getting his start with published stories in men's magazines, having done some lecture work, all this different stuff. King, once again, there's a writer, and he loves, you write what you know, as they all too often say. And then you've got, oh boy, what is my note right here? I can't even really see it very well. Yeah, that's right, Mississippi, John Shooter. And he's got his story, which is, it's basically the plight of Secret Window, Secret Garden, which is Shooter's story versus Sowing Season. And anytime I think Sowing Season, I think of Brand New, because they had that great song that was at the beginning of The Devil and God Are Raging Inside of Me. So yeah, it's basically him trying to figure out who the hell this person is, whether they're real or not. And we get answers, and you guys know the answers if you've actually read this story before. And we'll give distinction at the very end. But thoughts about Secret Window as I just rattle off through a few of my notes here. The idea of writing a story as feeling like stealing that King mentions here, I find that very fascinating, because it's like you're reaching into like this public, like a joined consciousness of sorts. And so therein is the possibility of why some people can come up with similar stories. So I find that fascinating. And also, as somebody who experienced this myself, like having the ex that you spent like so much time with, and they're just like checking up on you. They're like, I had a bad feeling, and that intuition and all that other stuff. It's a very weird situation, especially for me, who spent like half my adult life with one particular person, and they're out of the picture. And I'm very happy with Lady Catherine now, but it's just weird how that sort of reaching out that still goes down with people. It's something that I can relate to in Mort's case here, despite the fact that she's moved on and everything. So there is a nightmare sequence in here that I really dig, and it's in those cornfields, and it's where Shooter and his wife are both like coming after him. I thought that that's pretty dope. And I love this quote: "A woman who would steal your love when love was really all you had." That's solid stuff right there, man. But yes, anybody who's familiar with the story at this particular point, bad shizzle starts going down, and Mort can't seem to figure out why his cat has been killed, why his home that he still shares with his ex has been burned down. All of these peculiar things start transpiring, and he's positive that it's Shooter, but obviously everybody knows where this story kind of goes. So I wanted to read a quick passage from page 309. So this is what I have been trying to do more so with the book reviews, everybody, is just like find specific bits that I really dig. Okay, so this is one that I found fascinating, everybody. Mort didn't believe that people, even those who tried to be fairly honest with themselves, knew when some things were over. He believed they often went on believing, or trying to believe, even when the handwriting was not only on the wall, but written letters large enough to read 100 yards away without a spyglass. If it was something you really cared about and felt that you needed, it was easy to cheat. Easy to confuse your life with TV and convince yourself that what felt so wrong would eventually come right, probably after the next commercial break. He supposed that without its great capacity for self-deception, the human race would be even crazier, and it already was. And so that's definitely something that, I mean, I think all too often when somebody sees a relationship is doomed, or you just have that feeling in the back of your head that you've mucked up at work enough that they're probably going to let you go, something of that nature. Like, that's sort of just, you're trying to convince yourself otherwise, that things can be cool, things can be okay in this regard. But that's just, it's tough stuff, man. It really genuinely is. And yet it's passages like that that I find so just, it's cool to peer into the human psyche a little bit and be like, yep, we most definitely do that. I've done that. I've been guilty of that, so that's an interesting bit. And this is where you definitely have more similarities with both Misery and The Dark Half, and the fact that they all were written within like a year or two of each other. This is where I'm like, okay, King, you needed to get this out of your system, which is why you wrote about it so many times. But the fact that John Shooter is like, I want you to write me a story, just like just like Annie Wilkes did in Misery, just like in The Dark Half. This I don't know. It's the fandom of just the fandom of the demands of fandom. I guess that's the phrase that I was trying to concoct right there. And it's something that King was definitely probably over at this particular point, because in his 80s heyday, when he had become the king, when he had been crowned as El Rey, the king of horror, so to speak, that's where you probably you're like, hey, when's that next Dark Tower coming? When's this? When's that? And when fans start to get that sense of entitlement because they've been supporting you for so very long, and it's no longer that sort of graciously symbiotic situation. It's much more like kind of a what have you done for me lately, and the instant gratification and all that. So these are interesting things that he explores more here. Also, the idea that there's only really 5 to 6 different types of stories to tell. That's definitely even segueing into stuff that King covered in On Writing in his nonfiction work. And then dealing again with the loss of sanity. It's a common theme, and it's one that's relatable, obviously, because, and especially in the midst of isolation, like Mort is experiencing in this. So that's definitely a thing. But yeah, loss of sanity in situations of isolation. I mean, The Shining. There's various other times where King has tried to actually, take a peek into this, second guessing the home team similarity. Okay, where is this other passage? There was one other bit that I really wanted to make mention of. 360. Oh, where you at, yo? Okay. Start the final. Okay. So this is where there's a confrontation going down with Mort and with his wife. And she basically hits him with, I don't want to argue with you, Mort. She said softly, that part should be over. All I'm trying to say is that even when you were here, you were gone a lot. You had your own lover. Your work was your lover. Her voice was steady, but he sensed tears buried deep inside it. How I hated that bitch, Mort. She was prettier than me, smarter than me, more fun than me. How could I compete? And then, of course, he's like, blame it all on me. And that's one situation that also, it's one that ended a relationship for me many years ago, is that being that embroiled in your work, it's got to be very tough for a significant other when you are just that self-involved, and yet you need that time for creativity and for that attention. It's your job, for God's sake, man. I mean, and it's all about striking that balance as best you can, but having navigated those waters, having experienced arguments just like that, and the jealousy that is involved, and the those who aspire to create and need that sort of time to themselves to actually concoct and get things together, I mean, more power to situations like with Tabby, you know, where he has soldiered through and seemed to figure it out. And yeah, it's impressive stuff. You know, stealing a man's work when a man's work is all that he had. Yep, obviously getting back to that. Now, there's also an interesting classroom nightmare scene later on as we're getting towards the end of all of this. And that's where Mort is realizing that it's a repressed memory of the fact that he's like, I've never plagiarized before. I've never stolen anything. And then it's like, oh, yeah, you did. And it not only was a significant moment, it basically jump-started your career in the fact that he was in this class and there was this kid who was just leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in there. He steals his story, he submits it, and that story was, in fact, sewing season. And so there's this repression of personal guilt, and that's what, as we get to the conclusion and you realize that he is Shooter and he's been just like having these moments of slipping, man, he's slipping away. And yeah, he just has this overriding guilt for the fact that he wouldn't have a career if not for this plagiarism, if not for this theft. And so that's why he creates this alternate person to kind of confront him about the stuff that he has repressed and just buried deep down. And this is where the ending is definitely different than the film. In the ending, Mort is killed, and they, for whatever reason, King decided at the very end of this to go supernatural and to make it seem like maybe there was something going on. It's uttered at the very end of the book about how, yes, when that townie had driven by and Mort swore up and down that he's talking to Shooter, they didn't see anybody, but he claims that during one pass by, he saw like the reflection of something like spiritual, whatever. And so maybe there was this otherworldly presence that had, in fact, been that initial push for him to create Shooter in his head and slip into this insanity. So that's actually in comparison with David Coep's ending, where Mort kills his wife and her lover, or his ex-wife, I should say. And then he's like, he buries them in the corn, eating them and all the other stuff. It's funny because Coep basically took the ending of the short story sewing season, aka Secret Window, Secret Garden, and he basically just retrofitted that as the actual ending of the movie. This is actually, and this may be a controversial opinion, this is another one of the instances where I preferred the ending of the movie, similar to what they did with with Dr. Sleep. I preferred the ending of the movie in comparison with the ending here. But yeah, the tacked on supernatural ghost aspect. So that was something I wanted to at least make mention of. But am I totally wrong, or do you guys like just majorly disagree? Do you think that the booked ending is a little bit better in this? And it's also fascinating hearing King talk about the inspiration for this story and the fact that he was up in the laundry room and he just looked through that window down to Tabby's little secret garden from that window that he had made. And that sometimes, you know, King likes to talk about the genesis of story ideas in this in all four instances. And I thought that was kind of fascinating where, you know, a tale of this nature can just spring out of something. But some may argue that this has too many similarities to The Dark Half and to Misery. But for me, as far as just the aspect of writing means stealing and the split personality aspect and the deeply buried guilt over a major mistake and you know, stuff like that, this might be my favorite of the trio of those tales. As iconic as Misery is, I mean, where did I put my beverage? I'm looking for Fuego. But yes, guys, chime in. Let me know before we jump on to our third story. Here's the library policeman. What you think, and I will jump in and take a peek at the comments here. Oh, so refreshing. Damn breezy. But yeah, man, Secret Window, Secret Garden, hot take. It might just be my favorite of that trio of stories, at least. So let's go to live chat here, and let's see where everybody is at. Okay. Okay, so yep, John Turturro was amazing. Echoes Joshua Gordon. I really liked Wood's reading of Secret Window, Secret Garden, that you stole my story. Yeah, terrific stuff, man. He really sold the hell out of it, which I appreciate. Of course, King has to write about a writer, especially after being accused of plagiarizing Misery. Rat was the dumbed-down version of Secret Window, Secret Garden. Yeah, in a lot of ways, that too. I'm not going to disagree with you, Malito, and yet Rat is getting an adaptation. Anyway, Moving right along, Austin says, also one of the few stories where I like the movie ending better than the written ending. Damn Rizzle. Okay. 8 more days till Halloween. Well, it's actually a lot more than 8 days, but I'm digging that Spook Dev because I think that film is insanely underrated. If it was just titled Season of the Witch or, something different, it would have really seen the respect that I believe it deserves. Jesper's jumping on. Hello there, good sir. Long days and pleasant nights to you, man. Zach King says, nope, the movie ending was better. Wish the movie was in Derry. I agree. And, okay. Well, we are all caught the fuck up, which is sweet. I'm just going to make sure this is on the live chat aspect. All right, everybody. So unless you have some more things to say about Secret Window, Secret Garden, because that is another relatively faithful adaptation with the exception of the different ending, which is the improved ending, as we mentioned. But now we get to the really fun stuff because the latter 2 stories here have never been adapted into anything, unfortunately. And the Library Policeman, man, this is quite a story. And yet it's another one where I have to say, especially since it was written so shortly after it, yes, we know it's a similar sort of entity in this crazy woman, this crazy whatever the hell she is. She's like Pennywise Bob Gray sort of just evil, slumbering presence that reawakens and steals fear from children and all this other stuff. But it's also a celebration of writing and reading and all this other stuff. And Sam Peebles is an interestingly sympathetic character, and then he becomes a horrifyingly sympathetic character when you find out what his repressive memory is. And so, whereas it's repression of guilt in the previous story with Mort, in Sam Peebles' case in The Library Policeman, what we are inevitably trying to get to is his repression of a moment of shame and one that he had nothing to do with. So we will cruise through here. But Sam Peebles is this real estate dude. He also writes insurance policies and stuff. He steps in at this, I forget the actual name of it in here. It's like a Rotary Society or something like that. We have something similar here in the Phoenix area. It's called Toastmasters, and I don't know if they have different cells, whatever, around different parts of the country or the world or whatever, but it's essentially where all of these well-to-do business peeps get together, and a renowned person will get up and speak, and it's really like a networking sort of situation in a lot of ways. And so Sam Peebles is basically, he's called upon abruptly to step in and be the speaker at the Rotary Club this particular evening because of the fact that the acrobat who was supposed to do it, he got drunk and he tried to perform and he like breaks his neck. And so they're like, Sam, I'm in a pinch. You got to come and help me, man. And so that's where everything starts out. And I forgot that I had something right off the bat that I wanted to read here, which is 407. Where you at, boo? Where you at? Okay, yeah, that's right. Second paragraph here. I thought this was interesting. So right at the this is right at the very beginning of the story too. It is not bad enough, he thought, with a perhaps justifiable bitterness, that life is like a narrow beam over an endless chasm, a beam we have to walk blindfolded. It's bad, but not bad enough. Sometimes we also get pushed. And that's where you're like, hey, man, I'm already navigating the insanity of this existence, and then you have to throw pandemics at me and social unrest and all this other shit. It's like, man, as if 2020 wasn't going to be challenging enough with career aspirations and or friends of mine who are like raising families and all this different stuff. We had to throw in all this other craziness into the mix. Sometimes you get pushed. I don't know. It's just an analogy right at the very beginning that I significantly appreciated, and I thought that was pretty cool. So and it's also about the importance of independently owned businesses in small town life. That is basically what Sam is encouraged to discuss here, which is pretty cool. And he ends up calling it small town business, the lifeblood of America. That's right. And so as he's putting this speech together, he basically starts talking with Naomi, who is his part-time secretary. He reads it to her, and she's like, well, I think it needs a little bit of improvement. How about you go get one of those speech books from the library? They've got some different jokes and anecdotes that you can toss in to make it a little less dry, a little less, just kind of blah, a little more entertaining, which is when speaking engagements are always better, when it's less robotic and just there's more of you can still be fun and factual at the same time. It's something that we try to be here on the horror show with our reviews and with all of our coverage. We take horror seriously. We just don't take ourselves very seriously, is what I've always liked to say about it. And yeah, man, I mean, he has quite the work ahead of him. But yeah, he goes to the public library with hopes of beefing this thing up. And he goes to the library, but he doesn't go to the right library. He goes through some sort of like vortex or just time warpy, whatever. And that's where he meets, what is her name? Ophelia? I'm trying to remember what the hell her name is. Ophelia Torrey. Come on, Fueguísimo. Oh, man. I totally thought I had this right. Ardelia, that's right. Ardelia Lorix. Damn it, Fuego. So many names, so little time, so many books, so much to remember. But yeah, so Ardelia is this strange little woman that he meets when he's there. And Sam takes immediate notice of all of these different posters in the children's section that are just like fearsome looking and a little bit frightening. And it's like, he's like, oh, you're trying to scare these kids into making sure they return their books on time because the library policeman will come and get their ass. And actually come and get their ass. That's really horrible for me to say now that I think about it with something that is revealed late in the story. But yeah, he sees like Little Red Riding Hood and Grandma Wolf and, Never Take Rides from Strangers. He sees all these different, posters, and he thinks that they're the sort of thing that would kind of traumatize a child. He brings it to the attention of Ardelia, and she just kind of brushes it off, and she's kind of mad that he would even mention it in the first place, which is kind of funny. So when he goes and he implements some of the advice from these two books that he checks out, the speech is a hit. They get him all faded. He's like waking up late the next day, all this other stuff. So later on, he thanks Naomi for the recommendation, tries to slip her a little bit of cash as a thank you, mentions the name Ardelia, though, and that's when everything starts to unravel about the weirdness of that woman and what she actually entailed, and also what this library policeman, as the story implies, is actually going to be. There's a Paul Sheldon mention when she's at the library that I find funny. Have to make the connection to the Misery author as much as possible. And these are all, this is some discourse that he has along with Ardelia that I just found a little bit fascinating, where she's talking about all the kids want to listen to is Ozzy Osbourne and Guns N' Roses, and they want to check out books like Swan Song from Robert McCammon. And that is a name that just keeps popping up on the Freak Out Fridays and the Hail to Stephen King group all the goddamn time. I really need to read some McCammon, I believe his name is, at some particular point. They also mentioned V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic, and it's basically Ardelia just like giving disgust for those few things, and I thought that was interesting. But okay, this is another phrase that I found fun. While the road of good intention might lead to hell, the people who filled the potholes deserve some credit. I thought that was an interesting little observation and stuff. But so he basically, Sam Peebles, our main dude, he starts this little mini investigation because he's trying to figure out what happened with Ardelia, because it's apparently a sore spot among the people in this Iowa town, this Junction City that he lives in. And it basically takes him to finding out the fact that Naomi, his secretary, is also goes by her middle name of Sarah, and that she has been in Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time. Yeah, and in the process, with kind of falling in love with her, he also gets acquainted with this older guy who had been picking up his old newspapers for a while, this Dirty Dave of sorts. And Dirty Dave is the one who finally, after meeting up with his friends, wants some fucking Slim Jims, man. I want Slim Jims. I was just like, what, Slim Jims? Okay, whatever. Hey, when you're fading and you want some just processed meat stick, sure, to snap into a Slim Jim. Rest in peace, Randy Savage. But yeah, so it's Dirty Dave who basically finally gives us the insight about what Ardelia really is, and this is where the story goes full-on supernatural. He'd already encountered this library policeman before, this 7-foot towering, creepy guy who's like, where are your books? Your books are late. But the story really just gets pretty bonkers when you find out that Ardelia is an entity just like the one encountered in Pennywise, one that, albeit probably of a lower extent of power, but essentially doing the same thing, sucking and feeding off the fear of these children from the library back when Dirty Dave first met her when she had moved to the town in the early 60s. And just slumbering after eating enough, and how her shell like kind of breaks down over time and all this other stuff, which is interesting. But it's really the mystery of Ardelia Lortz and what she is all about. Children's dinner to benefit the library policeman. So that's interesting. The scary posters to induce fear within the kids. That she actually, so she has this romance. This evil creature has this romance with Dirty Dave, and he's just getting drunk with her constantly and just living in a fog. And he talks extensively about how his career was destroyed, unfortunately, by this relationship with her. He was already kind of going off the deep end, but she basically helped push him along and feed these demons within him, and drinking and all that other stuff, and just the stuff that got worse and worse and worse over time. But yeah, I mean, basically, she is a entity that's almost exactly like Pennywise, and so that's where, well, I love the hell out of this story, and I think it's brilliant and it's awesome, especially the fact that it came out so closely approximated. And granted, 1990 was when it was released, but I believe he said he wrote this in either 88 or 89, as I mentioned. So, and it had been completed like 3 years before that. So still fairly fresh in his mind, some of these fear-sucking sort of things. But yeah, so fascinating in that regard, but still similar enough. When there's the discussion, though, about how she told the three bears to the kids, and Goldilocks and the three bears, and how it actually ended with the bears taking Goldilocks and cutting her head off and boiling it and eating her brains, I was like, God damn, man, it's pretty crazy. So, I mean, this is definitely the book where Langoliers is like tense and Twilight Zone-y. Secret Window, Secret Garden, it's kind of like mystery thrillery. This is the one that goes full on horror in my estimation in like the back half of it, which is why I dig it so very much. And of course, you're going to go back to the library lair and have another confrontation. King is all about those final confrontations in the lair of the beast and so on. But yeah, where Dirty Dave is describing seeing how the kids' tears were drank by Ardelia, and even when the final confrontation with Sam and Dave and Naomi going against her at the very end and stuff, just how she changed and became insect-like when she was sucking the liquid out of these kids' eyes and all this. I mean, it's very grotesquely described and really fascinating in that regard. What is also hideously grotesquely described is the fact that you find out who this library policeman that Sam encountered as a kid was. It's a fear that he has to face. It is a shame that has been repressed. That there's really, I mean, that's the only way that he's going to be able to just work these demons out of him and to challenge these new ones that he's facing. And it's a really, really horribly described scene that I had trouble reading. I mean, as I'm sure anybody who has checked this story out would, it's so unsettling what happens with him. And you find out the significance of the red licorice, and you find out the significance of a library policeman and this fear for him, and the fact that, yeah, he was raped as a young boy going to the library, taken out in the bushes. And yeah, it's horribly described. It is so frightening, so unsettling. And yeah, but he's able to just dig up this nasty memory and face it, and it gives him strength to actually go and make this final confrontation with Ardelia after picking up the two missing books, repurchasing them, and trying to return them. And in that conflict, that final just battle between them, we know Dave ends up going down, which is very, very sad, because he's a character that, despite his problems, that he was very sympathetic, and the story of his friend whose boy had leukemia and the stuff with the baseballs, that's some heavy hitting stuff, and it shows that there was still good inside him despite all of the mistakes that had been made. And but at the very end, even after she's vanquished, even after the idea that's very similar to The Outsider of her shedding skin and wanting to put on I think she was trying to take on Sam's skin, if I remember correctly, and then with the whole nasty webbing boil on the back of Naomi that gets glopped in the licorice and then thrown on the train tracks and stuff. But nonetheless, she waits the final words of Dirty Dave, and that's where you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely a Pennywise situation here. So I don't know. It's a damn good story, though, despite all of those comparisons and similarities to other things. And so that was 3 past midnight, everybody. Since I see Austin threw in a couple super chats, which everybody never demanded or anything, but always supremely appreciated. It does help us with just the inner workings of the horror show. Between internet and editing software and all this different stuff that helps us bring the program to you, it is supremely appreciated anytime you are that supportive. It's really rad status badass of you. So I'm going to read those comments. And also for anybody who is just chilling, now we're down to only 13 because this has been going for about an hour. So those who have bared with as we approach the final story here and then wrap it up, supremely appreciated. If you haven't done a like on this video and you're still chilling out watching, it would be much appreciated because that's what those likes help us with the YouTube algorithm, help with the monetization of this video. So please and thank you, Sai, if you would be so kind in that regard. Just trying to bring the chat back up real quick, and it's running real slow. I'm actually gonna take this off of the Wi-Fi because that's got to be just kind of chug-a-lugging along with it. Let's see if that aided with the process. Just want to read Austin's things real quick before we jump into the final bit. Okay, Daniel Corey says one adaptation I definitely don't like better than the Source Langoliers. Yeah, you're definitely right about that. First time reading 4 past midnight, says Zach King. I found The Library Policeman to be the scariest of the 4. Most deaf. Especially, both real world scary and otherworldly scary. This balanced both of those in a very interesting fashion. I'm not sure if Library Policeman would fare well as an adaptation, to be honest. Yeah, it's one that I could see it being in like an anthology series, like maybe if they made it into an episode of the new Twilight Zone, or made it into like a Creepshow episode or something like that. I don't necessarily feel like it could function as a feature film, but to each their own. If anybody thinks otherwise, Library Policeman is my favorite novella in the collection, but the similarities between Ardelia and Pennywise are a bit much for me at times. Austin, I'm right there with you. And thanks for the donation, dude. Both feed off fear, have the abilities to shapeshift, hibernate in 30-year cycles, have an insect-like true form, and both are defeated using the power of belief. It continues in stories like The Outsider and If It Bleeds. Austin, you are spot on, sir, 100%. And that's where, once again, as much as I love Sai King, the recycling of gifted children, the confrontations and layers, the slumbering aspect, writers being in stories. I don't know. You write what you know, as I obviously said, and I love the man to death. He's my favorite author. He has a birthday this month, which is the day after mine, which is cool. So yes, the episode that is 2 weeks from today on the 19th, it's going to be something special. Looking forward to it. Maddie jumps in and says, I love the atmosphere of the first half of The Library Policeman, creepy, mysterious, falls apart in the second half and it gets more silly, especially with the red licorice ending. Well, yeah, debatable, obviously. Austin chimes in and says, deserves a film adaptation. I can see Kurt Russell or Jeff Bridges being a Dirty Dave. Yeah, I like Dirty Dave, very similar to like Wireman. Give me Jeff Bridges for both of those roles. I would be happy with that casting either way. Okay, La Sombra says the power of belief also defeats Leland Gout, if I remember correctly. I don't think the Library Policeman earned that resolution, though. Maybe I'm in the minority here. Austin also says there is also a Stephen King reference. Haha, yes, there is actually, which is funny about this. I love how Sam and Sarah end up in the end of Needful Things. If so, I space that. Damn Reezy, man. But that's I'm embarrassed. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research. It's been a hot minute since I've read Needful Things, and I was actually thinking about that as I was reading The Sundog, which is going to be the last thing we talk about here and wrap things up. Is I was like, oh, I forgot that Polly was mentioned. I knew there was a Pangborn mention. I knew there was a Cujo reference, if I recall correctly. And okay. All right. So poor Sam, when reading that scene, I was really like, really? You're going to narrate the whole thing, huh? Jeez. Yeah, it was like, I couldn't stomach it. It was so friggin' rough, man. It was beyond me, unfortunately. That scene reminds me of the branch scene in The Outsider. Oh, God, yeah. Sometimes I wonder, because King has actually talked about abuse of young children here and there, and not to really open up a can of worms or anything, but I really wonder, in the fact that it's a topic that he has returned to from time to time, it really makes me sad that potentially he experienced something like that as a kid. So yeah. All right. That scene reminds me of King's characters often going inside a lair. Yes. Yeah. Truly. Truly. All right. So we're trying to wrap things up right now with our final story, which is the Sundog, which is our 4 past midnight, our 4th past midnight, obviously. And yes. So starts off with old Kevin Delvan, and he's finally getting a Polaroid, a son, as he wanted for his 15th birthday. And it's cool because it's his golden birthday. He's turning 15 on the 15th in the story, so that's something to keep in mind. And there's something weird about his camera right off the bat, and because of the fact that it's not actually taking photos. For whatever reason, it's just like, I think, I'm trying to remember if it starts out as a fence and then you slowly start to see the dog, or if you just see the fence initially and then the dog comes in the frame. But lo and behold, most important thing being the fact that, it's not taking the actual pictures, and so there's definitely something wrong with it. But he's got a well-developed family in Castle Rock, which is where this story takes place. King, in the introduction, mentions that it's a story that is in between the Dark Half and Needful Things, and so it's supposed to bridge the gap between those two, and it was supposed to be this trilogy that ended Castle Rock storytelling as we know it. Obviously, we know that did not prove to be the case. He would later revisit at least a little bit, stuff like Elevation, and yes, but so he's got a well-meaning father, sweet mother, whatever. His little sister is obsessed with horror movies, and so she's like watching Chucky during this story early on. It's mentioned that she had sent in a fan letter to Jason Voorhees and got an autographed picture back. I mean, little stuff like that. I mean, just the development of the family dynamic is very well done here. And Kevin is a cool little protagonist, I must say. He's the one that we follow for the first bit of the book, and then we shift places to the person who he's recommended to go see about his malfunctioning Sun 660, and it's none other than Reginald Pop Merrill, who was made significantly more sympathetic in the second season of Castle Rock with a performance by Tim Robbins that I did enjoy. Even if I didn't really like the second season of Castle Rock that much, I did feel like Tim Robbins as a different turn of the wheel version of Pop, who was not perfect, obviously, still a flawed individual, but also obviously the young Annie Wilkes and Lizzie Kaplan. Those are the two standout aspects of that season. Everything else, a lot of the writing, meh, I didn't really like it so much. But the stuff with Coy Annie and Joy, that is just heart-wrenching shizzle. But so his teacher recommends he goes to the Emporium Glorium, Glorium. I believe it's Emporium Glorium, but it's basically Pop's junk shop, his trinket, pawn store of whatever, which is also his front for, just lending out money to people and just various kind of under the radar unsavory things, which is no surprise in a place like Castle Rock. So he checks out the camera with Kevin, and he's immediately fascinated by it. And he wonders if he can turn a profit, if he can somehow obtain it, which he does through nefarious means by buying another Polaroid 660 and pulling the switcheroo on him. And the interesting thing is that Pop goes and he tries to sell this to a few different of the Mad Hatters, as he calls them, and yet he doesn't have any success. First and foremost, the initial guy who owns an island, the richest person that he goes to, who he thinks he can get the most cash from it, that person thinks it's a straight up fake, and he's like, there must be some sort of printing mechanism in it that is spitting all of this stuff out, especially since it's in sequence. And Pop does something early on where he takes the first number of photographs that Kevin had taken, and he has a buddy of his basically sequence them on a videotape so it actually looks like a moving image, like movie status, which is exactly, movies are moving pictures, right? So that's how that's gone about. And you actually see the movement of this rabid looking, black dog and stuff. But even after he steals the camera, and that's when it shifts to Pop being our main character, at least for the second act, and then in the third act we revert back to Kevin and stuff. But yeah, he doesn't have any luck. He goes to these two old twins, and they're like, there's something evil about that thing. We don't want to possess that. And it's even a similar reaction to one of the later guys that he goes to. He wants to make him a Spam sandwich and stuff. So Pop becomes increasingly aggravated about the fact that he thought he was going to make some serious Skrilla off of this thing. And he's also starting to realize that the images, when he's taking photographs and showing these Polaroids after printout, the images that he's seeing now that he's kind of joined with the camera after stealing it from Kevin, Yeah, the images look a lot different to him than they do to other people who are actually looking at these photos. For instance, the dog, as it's getting closer, at least in Pop's viewpoint, is transforming into this like rabid-looking, one-eyed, like big teeth as can be, and that's where he makes a Cujo reference, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's just really interesting how he basically comes to this conclusion that and Kevin kind of does in his own right separately as he realizes the camera hasn't been destroyed, but it's basically like there's this belief that there is an entire separate world within this camera. There are other worlds than these. Yes, we all know this to be true. So it's just fascinating that there is not only that in play, that this particular Polaroid has its own world within it. There's like the 2D Polaroid world, and then there is this ghost in the machine, so to speak, in this evil demon dog that's in there. We're talking way worse than Ghostbusters, man. And yeah, it's a dope idea, and it's one that I really appreciate the heck out of. And Kevin obviously realizes that there is something amiss here, and he goes with his father to try to confront Pop. Doesn't go as easily as he had hoped. Dog eventually escapes. Dog kills Pop, and yet Kevin is able, through some personal smarts and just intuition and just, pray and plead sort of situation, where he is able to, as the dog is escaping, he takes a picture of it in this other Sun 660, captures it, and that's really, it's really a relatively simple narrative in a lot of ways. I think it's the shortest story in here, if I'm not mistaken, and only around 160 pages, but it's a very tight, thrilling, scary in its concept, and effective story, very well told. And you've got, as I mentioned, there's reference to Polly Chalmers, who's got the shaky hands and then has the little romance thing going on with Pangborn and Needful Things. And so it is very much that bridging story that King describes it as in the actual forewords that I was mentioning and stuff. So this is one that I'm quite fond of, and that I'd forgotten just how kind of creepy it is. And once again, you've got that EC ending of on his 16th birthday, a year later. Once again, it starts on the day and the story ends on the day, the passage of time and everything, as King talks about in the introduction. He gets a new gift, and he gets a computer after the great aunt has died. And lo and behold, as they say at the very end of it here, I will just read it. He decides, for whatever reason, does Kevin, to type into his new computer, "The dog is loose again. It is not sleeping. It is not lazy. It's coming for you." Or, excuse me, that's not, what did he write? I'm trying to remember. Okay, Kevin wrote, "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy sleeping dog." Only that was what came out of the printer, and the rest that came out, the words there read, "The dog is loose again. It is not sleeping. It is not lazy. It's coming for you, Kevin. It's very hungry, and it's very angry." So, yeah, give that twist ending that, nope, you only captured him briefly, man, but this is still a situation that it's not over. It's not over. So give me your thoughts, guys, on the Sun Dog, the final story here. I know my dude Andrew Thompson from the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group is a big fan of this one, so shout out to Andrew and his constant cool palaver with all of us here. So yeah, chime in with the Sun Dog. I'm trying to get back to where we once belonged, which was, keep turning this off and then chiming back in for it as we are here at the finish line. But give me some thoughts, y'all, about the Sun Dog. Very, very curious. So, okay. We're almost there. Okay. Austin says, "Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Frank Darabont supposed to do an adaptation of the Sun Dog?" I think that was announced like a long time back, maybe sometime in the 90s, but just like, Ramiro at one point was supposed to do From a Buick 8. They basically option these properties, and then they have windows of time to actually make them. And that's why Under the, not Under the Dome, Doohickey was actually optioned, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. And there was even the article in one of the trades, and it lapsed. And so it's back floating around in the ethers again. So yeah, it's always kind of a bummer when that's what is transpiring. Okay, let's get back to the live chat for you, Simo. But no, there's no. The Sun Dog and the Library Policeman are two of the only properties unadapted and not currently in development for something in the future. Okay, continuing onward. Also, I love the mention of the bandstand from the Dead Zone. Wow, another deep cut, which, that's the thing. There's so many different Castle Rock references that are within this that, it's really like a Where's Waldo in a lot of ways of just just picking through things. That King scene, okay. La Sombra says, King's comments about the weird flatness of Polaroid pictures brought back so many childhood memories. I took so many pictures and they all looked off. Yeah, there is something just the instantaneous capture of time about a Polaroid that is fascinating. And there's a situation of dialogue that goes down between Kevin and Pop at one particular point where they're talking about how certain devices like Polaroids, like certain recording devices and their inherent ability to actually capture spiritual phenomenon. And so I thought that was pretty cool. Okay. Do you think King should do a sequel with digital cameras? Boy, I don't know. I mean, Joe did that camera story. I think it was called Polaroid, if I'm not mistaken. That was in Strange Weather, which Lady Catherine is reading right now. Aloft, I think, is my favorite from Strange Weather. But okay. On the topic of films, I would love to see the original Apt Pupil, as in like the original ending where he's like shooting people up and all crazy, even though X-Men director, even though Mr. Singer is a real piece of shit as far as some of the horrible things he's been accused of, it's tough because he's a great director, and I feel like his adaptation of Apt Pupil, Brad Renfro, Ian McKellen, if you guys haven't seen it, it is terrific. But yeah, guys, we have been going for a little over an hour now, so unless anybody has a few other things that they are throwing in, I just wanted to extend a grande gracias for everybody who tuned in to the discussion today about 4 Past Midnight, which turns 30 this month. And now I suppose it's time to make mention of what the September book of the month is going to be. And this is another anniversary that we have this month, and yet it is a 40th anniversary. The September book of the month, which we will be discussing in a live stream the first Saturday of October, none other than Firestarter! Rest peacefully, Sir Prodigy. So yes, everybody, this is going to be our, let me put it back here. Sorry, Georgie. But yeah, that is our book of the month for this September. So very much looking forward to that. But I do also have to make a couple other really quick announcements in the fact that Secret Windows also celebrates its 20th anniversary this month. I'm going to be doing a review of this. I believe it's the 26th of September. So it's not going to be a live thing or anything. And that's because this is a companion piece to On Writing, and it's basically unreleased essays, introductions, and things of that nature. I haven't checked this one out in a long, long time, and there's a couple other things that have been reprinted, but interesting insight. So if anybody has a copy of this or feels the inclination to track it down on September 26th, I believe that is going to be a review of this. And then in October, there is also the anniversary of The Colorado Kid. The Colorado Kid is not going to be the book of the month in October, but I'm going to be doing a review of this. And also checking out for the first time ever the first season of Haven, which this is loosely based on. And so those are going to be 2 videos to look forward to in October. But most importantly, the first Saturday in October, which let's just get the actual date if I'm just spouting it off. So yeah, Saturday, October 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. That is going to be the discussion all about Firestarter back there. So I have been Jaime Fuego, and I extend that grande gracias once more. You can find Wa on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Here on YouTube, I do also have my own personal, smaller YouTube channel where I cover non-scarific stuff. This past week, I did reviews for Tenet, for what else? Bill and Ted Face the Music. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this stream, just last night, I reviewed I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is a Netflix exclusive, the new Charlie Kaufman. Also, if you want further palaver of the Stephen King variety and all King family-related stuff, we slipped that in there as well. Jump on over to the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. That's where we have an awesome Ka-Tet of peeps, around 900 people at this particular point. And yeah, great discussion. On Fridays, we freak out and we let everybody talk about pretty much anything they want, provided it is courteous and cordial and respectful of other people's opinions, whether it's art or, music, different authors, whatever it may be. So yes, check that out if you feel inclined. And then lastly, this is something Cecil and I have been talking about for a great long while, and something I'm going to be making some additional announcements about formally on social media. But you are hearing it first here that we are getting together a new Hail to Stephen King logo for the show, and we want to implore anyone interested to submit their idea. So I'm basically hoping to give it about 2 weeks, and on the show on September 19th, which is the weekend of my birthday, and Steve King's birthday is the following Monday, we are hoping to unveil a new logo, and we're not sure if we should vote on the submissions or if we should just pick it ourselves, give some insight in the comments or here in the chat before I cut things off. But yeah, man, that is going to include a prize pack of a few King things that we put together, a book, a couple DVDs, and so yeah, if you or someone you know would be down to design a Hail to Stephen King logo for the show, I implore you to give it an attempt and send it over to the horror show. Any social media sectors, you can throw it on Instagram and tag us there, Facebook, or you can email us directly infuegotainment@gmail.com, or you can thehorrorshow666@yahoo.com. So those are the two best destinations for that. But that's going to be a day for us, everyone. Thank you so very much. Danke, arigato, merci. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending a little bit of time here on a Saturday for the palaver. It always brightens my day and my week. So I guess until we meet again, everyone, and the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, cinemigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. But I'm hopeful that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, you know the drill. Stay scared and read Stephen King. Thanks, y'alls. Made my day so much better, so much better. Sabbath. Generals gathered in their masses.